Monte the Music Man Sieberns hanging out with you on this Thursday morning, and Mayor Richard Strick in studio. Mayor, good morning to you.
Hey, good morning, Monte, to you and your listeners. It's great to be with you this morning.
Hey, it's great to have you back. We missed you last week.
Yeah, I got a chance to get away for a long weekend. My wife and I got a chance to recharge and go visit some close friends that are going through a tough spot.
Well, it's fantastic that you got to visit them, and hopefully that visit helped them out and helped to kind of, make things a little brighter for them.
Well, we know it was good for all of us just to see each other's smiling faces and get to meet one of their kids that has been born since the last time we saw them. So it was a great time. Glad to be back, though.
All right. Well, glad to have you back. Boy, we're talking about there's some pretty unsure times going on right now with everything that's going on with Russia, Ukraine on a global level. And people are a little scared, wondering how that's going to affect things locally, and or if it will. And I guess let's address some of those things this morning on the show.
Sure, Monty. Glad to have a conversation about it. One of the things I would talk about sometimes on the campaign trail is just the reality that Huntington is a small boat on a big global ocean when it comes to the economy and world events. And the reality is there's a lot of waves that we can't control, but we do just need to navigate well. And so that's something that we keep in mind with situations like this. And so while I was on that trip out west to see our friends, one of the things I picked up was a book off my shelf that I've been meaning to read for a couple years called The Hawk and the Dove. And it's a double biography of Paul Nitz and George Kennan. And those two were the architects of the U.S. policies during the Cold War, and just really helpful context to get a sense of what this history has been like in the last 70 years between our nations, and being in contact with friends that have served in ministry in Ukraine. And at my heart, I'm an optimist with an idealist streak. I believe America can and should be a force for good in the world, but how we use our great power it's a tremendous responsibility, and wisdom's knowing which tool to use and when, and understand in times like this there's a lot of uncertainty that folks have. So I'm glad we can talk about that this morning.
Well, you're absolutely right. So maybe discuss some of the effects you've seen, and some of the perhaps if there is a light at the end of the tunnel or an upside or something we know that we can do as people. Let's cover some of that ground.
Sure. Well, let's start with some of the impacts that we're all already seeing, right? And we know one of the most immediate ones that we see every day on our commutes is that gas prices have gone up significantly here as the invasion by Russia has taken place, and we understand that those impacts happen. But what folks may not have seen yet is just yesterday, after quite a bit of lobbying from the U.S., the UAE just made an announcement about looking to have OPEC increase crude production. And as a result, then, we've seen some drops in the price of crude as a result of that announcement. And so the reality is that gas prices and some of these other things in the economy, they may rise and fall swiftly, and it's going to be tough to have a consistent read on things for a while. Gas prices, of course, are a function of demand in this chain and crude, and then distribution and supply chains, and a lot of those things are being disrupted right now, so we're going to have to adapt to it. Some of the other pieces that I've heard folks talk about is, we got some folks who, they're seeing a little bit of bloodbath in the marketplace with their stock portfolios, and, that's a real thing. But again, one of the things, if you talk to any financial advisor, their assurance is always to not panic. Don't try and buy your way out of something. If you've got an opportunity and you want to buy something low so you can watch it rise back again, then you can. But overall, the stock markets, as you hold on to them over time, they tend to work themselves out in your favor. And then the final thing that we'll be keeping an eye on and we'll be watching for will be food prices. Russia and Ukraine are significant wheat producers. At the same time, we realize that we might not see the effects of that shortage in global markets. And, maybe the greater impact might come from destruction of some of the ports on the Black Sea and some of the shipping lanes and slowing down of transit lines. And so there's going to be a lot of things coming along that we're not going to be able to control, but we can control how we respond to them.
No, it's so true, and already we're seeing interesting things with just finding certain things that you don't even think about or that you might take for granted. A perfect example, a little while back, my wife had asked for some peanut M&Ms, and good luck finding them, and some of that has to do with supply chains and things of that sort. Are we still digging our way out from under those type of effects? that we've noticed. I mean, maybe not necessarily because of Russia or Ukraine, but just because of times in general that it's harder to get supplies in for certain products. Have you seen a lot of that?
Yeah, I think we're all seeing a lot of that, and you know, my wife and I have had to change some of our practices and what things that we used to take for granted that we'd always be able to get on our shopping list. We might not be able to find those, and so we're looking for substitutes, or we're changing our menu at home. And you know, it's that's a challenge sometimes, and especially I feel for our friends with younger kids, because younger kids sometimes react poorly to menu changes, or less well than adults. At least the adults, we hope, are being mature about it. But the reality is that we all got to make these adjustments, and so one of the things that I keep in mind as far as things that we can do right now is I try to practice gratitude. This whether it's been COVID or it's been the invasion of Russia of Ukraine. That's hitting our household budgets, but Russian artillery is hitting Ukrainian households right now, and my heart goes out to those folks. And like I said, I got friends who've been in ministry over there. They're having a tough time. They're going through. They're concerned for their friends and loved ones that they've met over there, that they've served over there, and we're looking for wisdom to prevail in this and for an end to this conflict.
Do you think that by taking some actions ourselves, we can help minimize the length of time that these things affect us? I mean, I know we can't control it all, but for example, you were talking about the gas prices, where more things like carpooling may come in, or if people are going the same way, that type of thing. And that would increase the number of people that could get to work for a far less rate if everyone was helping everyone out. Things of that nature.
No, I think you're exactly right, Monty. And those sorts of broad practices like carpooling, or if you're able to bike and you want to bike as the weather warms up, go for that. If you've got the option of, if you're a household with multiple vehicles, maybe you've got a fun vehicle that eats gas like it's going out of business, maybe it's time to switch over to the other vehicle that's a little bit more economical right now. And there's a lot of things that we can do to help lower demand in the system right now, and that in turn is going to impact pricing. And so that's a big thing to keep in mind. And and the other piece of this, and again, it comes back to similar to this idea of practicing gratitude, is that each household is going to be able to handle this to different capacities. Some of us are fortunate. We get paid well enough that, hey, there's an inconvenience here, right? But then there's others who are working jobs that don't pay well enough. And, for them, an inconvenience is, they might not be able to make their bills, and they might not be able to stay up on things. And so I would just encourage folks, especially in our community, to be mindful, to be patient, be generous with one another. If you know that there's somebody who maybe their household is going to be a little bit tighter than yours, maybe you offer that carpool to them. You don't wait for them to ask. There's things that we can do to initiate a generous practice with each other, because ultimately our biggest strength as a community is that we know each other and we can look out for each other.
So true, and that's where the churches, the many churches around the area, can get involved. And maybe rather than build that or put that new addition on the Family Life Center, put that money back in the community for people who are having a bit of a struggle, or maybe need a little extra help with fuel because their job might be a little farther out of town. So you're right. I think if we all pull together as a community, that sense of ecclesia, as I've said before, we can really get through this.
Well said, Monty. Well said. And and I think, again, one of the other things that I found is a virtue I try to practice in my life is humility and patience. The reality is right now we have to remember some of the old Cold War rules that many of us haven't had to live under, and many others have maybe forgotten. And as we remind ourselves of those, one of the key things here is avoiding a hot war with a hostile nuclear power. And as we look at the decision-making that our leaders in Congress and the White House, the Pentagon, the decisions that they're making right now, they're making based on a lot more information than we have. We need to be prayerful for them to have wisdom and humility as they govern things, but we also need to make sure that while we're asking for and holding accountable, that we're recognizing that as they make these decisions, whether it's regarding Polish jets and German air bases controlled by the U.S., we've got a lot of data points on the ground that are often conflicting. The fog of war is real, and we don't always know why some of these decisions are made or not made. And that also includes for decisions of why different groups may may boycott certain things. I just saw a report. The Cardiff Philharmonic decided not to perform a Tchaikovsky performance, and everybody kind of took that as a virtue signal, cancel culture kind of thing. But when the director of the orchestra put out a statement, he clarified, the reality for them was that the set list they had performed for and were practicing, they had 2 Russian military marches in it, and they had one that was titled Little Russia, which is a title that's insulting to Ukrainians, and one of their lead performers is Ukrainian. And so for them, it wasn't so much canceling Tchaikovsky, it was being sensitive to their orchestra member, and it was being sensitive to, we're not going to perform some Russian jingoistic marches here. And so, we got to be patient with folks. We got to ask questions. We got to seek to understand before we make judgments about these decisions. And, that's something to keep in mind, especially as we hear folks maybe talk about a no-fly zone. The reality is we're talking about a no-fly zone. We're talking about taking control of Ukrainian airspace, and that means getting into dogfights with Russian fighter jets. And we might win those dogfights, especially the way we've seen the Ukrainians take it to them. But the issue isn't the dogfight; it's what comes next. And so we want to be praying for wisdom and patience and humility and truth and justice with our leadership, that they'd be living those things out. It's hard decisions that they're making.
Well, and I appreciate you putting that on a local level, because, like you said, it affects us. Are you seeing any kind of light at the end of the tunnel, or any positive things that you see going ahead that you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, as we look on the local level, again, we're seeing some incredible investment by folks in this place. These are local folks that maybe the disruption of COVID made them realize, I'm tired of working for somebody else. I want to work for myself, and so they're starting up a new business, and that's great, and we want to support that. And then there's also been some significant investment from outside firms as well, and we welcome both, because the reality is, it takes both to have a strong local economy here. And again, as we try to navigate these disruptions, we can create our own practices to support one another through these difficult times.
And I think that's what it takes. So I appreciate you coming down, spending a little time with us this morning, and giving us the reality, yet giving us some hope as well. So we always appreciate that.
Well, glad to be a part of it, Monte. And again, I'm no expert on these things. I'm doing my best to walk alongside my team of equals here in the community, and we're all in this together. So I appreciate folks banding together to help us get through things.
All right, we appreciate you coming down. We look forward to seeing you again next week.
Sounds good, Monte.